I took my husband's suggestion and got myself a college-age boyfriend. Only then did I understand why my husband never came home whenever he was with his college-age girlfriend. In simple terms, it was too damn good. I let the young man stay in our house. I let him wear my husband's pajamas. I let him drink my husband's wine. I even gave him my husband's research data to help him write his thesis. I stood my husband up on a date so I could celebrate my boyfriend's 100th day with me. He responded by shoving me onto the bed, his eyes bloodshot. Today's our 3rd wedding anniversary. Madeline, why do you only seem interested in spending time with him instead of me? I stared at him in confusion. What? You're the one who said we had an open relationship. And that I could take another lover, too. I shot back, I'm just doing exactly what you told me to. Xavier Bates proposed opening our relationship after we had a huge fight. The reason for the fight was simple. It was my birthday. But he wanted to leave after getting a call from Raina, linguist. She sprained her foot and no one is helping her. I have to go, the hero declared frantically without even looking me in the eye. I stepped in front of the door to stop him. But today's my birthday, Xavier. He frowned. You have a birthday every year. He snapped. But Raina has no one else to look after her. Be the bigger woman. I could not understand why. Not wanting him to leave somehow made me small-hearted. I also failed to see how a young woman spraining her foot was more important than celebrating my birthday with me. It was not even the first time he had abandoned me, because something had come up with Raina. Raina was my husband's research assistant. She was terrible at her job too. She could not read or consolidate data at all. Xavier used to come home and complain about her, calling her as dense as a rock and too dull-witted to ever improve. He had apparently even shouted at her so harshly that she cried. I used to chastise him for it. Stop calling her those names. She sounds like a sensitive young woman. Don't shout at her like that. I did not think much of it when he started smiling whenever he mentioned Raina. She finally got the data analysis right. I guess she's not as hopeless as I thought. She earned a scholarship. She insisted on treating me to a meal. At the time I felt relieved. It seemed the professor and his assistant had finally developed a much better working relationship. Last month I learned to make clam chowder from our housekeeper. My hands blistered from mishandling the hot pot, and I made plenty of mistakes along the way. But I was thrilled with the result. I filled a thermos with the chowder and went to Xavier's college so he could try it. The door to his office was unlocked. It stood slightly ajar, so I pushed it open. Raina was hugging him, with her head against his chest and one arm wrapped around his waist. My blood ran cold. Tears sprang to my eyes. What are you doing? I yelped. Other students began peeking into the office. Xavier's expression darkened. Instead of explaining himself, he called security to throw me off the premises. A fight broke out. The chowder spilled from the thermos onto the carpet. He did not care. He did not even glance at me. All he cared about was calming Raina down. That evening, Xavier came home late. I caught the faint scent of a fragrance that I knew did not belong to me. My eyes were red. Why were the two of you embracing each other? He was in a terrible state of mind. He replied matter-of-factly. It was a slip. I stared at him in disbelief. That's it? She was holding you that tightly and you're telling me it was a slip? Xavier, I spent 6 hours learning how to make that pot of clam chowder for you and you didn't even take a sip. He fell silent. Then he grabbed the first aid kit, gently took my hand and began treating the blisters. There's no need to do things like this for me, he said. I did not understand, Xavier. What did he mean? Was he talking about the clam chowder? Or about me showing up at his college? He never made himself clear. Mom used to tease him for being simple-minded and straightforward. She thought those traits made me compatible with Xavier, who was far more shrewd and clever. Was that really what she meant? He never explained himself completely, and I always had to guess what he was trying to say. Our relationship seemed to return to normal after that. But Raina's invisible presence kept growing. Whenever her data analysis ran into problems, he would rush to the college. Even in the middle of the night, when she wanted to move out of the dorm, he was the one who searched for an apartment. When she came down with a cold, he went out to buy medicine for her. He always had a reason. It always sounded noble and completely justified. I kept getting upset over it. I cried, shouted and threw hurt-filled tantrums. Then Xavier would find a new way to comfort me and I would forgive him. That was until that birthday. He was about to leave when I finally cried out. You actually like her, don't you? He froze with one hand on his coat. Then he sighed and turned to me. Maddie. When will you finally understand that there's more to my life than you? I have my career. And other people who rely on me could tell you the same thing. There's more to your life than me. So stop clinging. Open relationships are popular these days, right? Why not be more open yourself? Explore the world, explore yourself. It would do you a lot of good. What was an open relationship? I had no idea, but I listened to him. He wanted me to explore myself. So I did. That was how I met Morgan McClary. At a bar. It accidentally smashed a bottle of red wine. Worth $8,800. And the manager refused to let him leave. He wore a collared shirt. That had been bleached and washed so many times. It had almost lost its color. An old bag with fraying seams hung from his shoulder. I suddenly felt sorry for him. Thus I paid the penalty the manager had imposed on him. And invited him home. I handed him a set of pajamas and said, "Your clothes are a mess. You should take a shower and change into." These pajamas belonged to Xavier. I had bought them while we were attending an exhibition in Paris. Because I thought they would look incredible on him. Unfortunately, when I brought them home, Xavier complained that I was wasting my money. And never wore them even once. Morgan showered quickly. "Thank you so much, miss," he said sheepishly as he stepped out of the bathroom. "If it weren't for you, I don't know how I would have gotten out of there." I wasn't used to being thanked like that, so I waved it off. No. It wasn't that much money." He froze. "It doesn't matter. I'll repay you, I promise," he said. "I'll take on more part-time jobs and pay you back little by little." "Part-time?" I asked, surprised. "What do you do full-time?" "Wait. Are you a college student?" He nodded slowly. "Yes. Miss. I'm in my first year of post-grad. I work part-time at a bar to support myself however I can." My gaze shifted to the shirt he had taken off. And I noticed the worn collar covered with lint. A pang tightened my chest. Xavier had been just like this before he received his sponsorship. His shirts had faded from being washed and worn so many times. He had worked one part-time job after another. Just to earn enough for a decent meal. "You don't have to repay me," I said. "Just cook something for me. A decent meal will do. It is my birthday after all." I'd wanted to celebrate it with Xavier. I had spent an entire week planning everything. From dinner at a newly opened restaurant downtown. To a peaceful evening walk under the city lights. And then he left for Reina instead. Morgan's eyes lit up. "Really? That sounds terrific. I'm an excellent chef. Happy birthday, by the way." He hurried into the kitchen. A moment later. The rich aroma of freshly cooked food drifted through the air. When the meals were served, I was overjoyed. Every dish tasted exactly the way I liked it. I was so happy that I showered him with praise. Morgan's smile was so wholesome. "I'm glad you like it so much. Oh, how about I make your meals every day from now on? As a sign of gratitude? Please. It's the only way I know how to repay you for your act of kindness." He looked so sheepish as he waited for my answer. It was like looking at a cute, wholesome little puppy. Excitement bubbled up inside me and I found myself nodding sure. That evening, Morgan stayed at my house. The next morning, I woke to find the house spotless. Surprised, I asked, "Did you clean all this up?" "Yeah, I felt like keeping my hands busy," Morgan replied bashfully. "Hey. So I know a diner around here that makes the best breakfast. Wanna go together? My treat?" I nodded. Morgan went upstairs to get his things, while I got ready to take a morning shower. Just then, Xavier returned, carrying a box of strawberry-flavored cake and a breakfast set. His voice was flat as he greeted me. "Morning, Maddie. Have your breakfast. It's bad to skip a meal." I didn't want that. I was already eager to try the diner Morgan had told me about. After all. Hence. I shook my head and replied candidly, "I'll pass." Xavier frowned as though a thought had just occurred to him. "Are you still mad about last night? Why I told you Reina sprained her foot at the college?" I couldn't have possibly ignored that. Stop being so small-minded and jealous. It wasn't that. I just wanted to celebrate my birthday with my Xavier. Suddenly noticed the freshly washed pajamas hanging on the balcony. And asked sharply who wore my clothes. For some reason, I felt a twinge of guilt. But then again, Xavier had told me to explore myself and consider an open relationship. So I had done nothing wrong. "Well, a new friend I met borrowed them," I replied. A shadow of displeasure flashed across Xavier's eyes. Before his expression relaxed. As though he had reached a conclusion. Massaging his temple, he said tiredly, "Maddie, this is so immature. You went out, found the first guy on the street, and brought him home to wear my pajamas just to get a rise out of me." I blinked. "Huh? You shouldn't have done that. You know how limited your judgment is. You could have been duped and taken advantage of so easily." Xavier always thought I was stupid. He had always believed that if I ever left him, I would be completely helpless. And yet Morgan didn't see me that way. We had only met and talked for a few hours the night before. But he had praised my intelligence more times than Xavier had in years. He thought I was incredible. For recognizing every luxury brand and designer item I saw. He thought I was amazing for knowing the price of a bottle of wine off the top of my head. And realizing that the manager had massively inflated it to push him. He said I wasn't stupid. I was just reluctant to apply myself. At worst, I only seemed dull-witted because I was too lazy to think things through. I had liked hearing that. Which was why Xavier mocking my intelligence again pissed me off so much. I was about to fire back when I heard Raina call from outside. Professor. Is Maddie upset again because she misunderstood our relationship? I don't know why she's so obsessed with my presence. Xavier's attention immediately shifted to her. He hurried over, took her hand and helped her up. Why are you here? Your foot hasn't recovered. She leaned against his shoulder and said sweetly. Because I got worried about the two of you fighting over me. I feel bad about it. She walked over to me with an innocent look in her eyes. Maddie, I'm telling you honestly. Our relationship is purely professional. He's my professor and I'm his student. There's nothing more to it. I don't want Professor Bates to suffer unnecessary misunderstandings. Oh, was that so? Her dress looked new. In fact, I had seen it on Xavier's online shopping receipt. I also remembered the Instagram post she had made the night before. It was a photo of Xavier paying the bill with the caption, I'm glad you're here. The old me would have burst into tears on the spot. And demanded that Xavier explain himself. But today, other than feeling pretty pissed off by his comment about my intelligence, all I could think about was that diner Morgan had mentioned. Xavier was right. After all, opening yourself up to new people really did have its perks. Suddenly, everything felt a lot less triggering. My silence made Xavier frown. But before he could say anything, Raina spoke up. Professor. Aren't we supposed to be heading to the lab? We might run out of time. Xavier nodded, yeah. You're right. Let's go. He set the cake on the table and turned to me. It's peak season at work, Maddie. You should be trying to lighten my burden, not add to it. He and Raina left in a hurry. Morgan came downstairs with his bag in hand. I'm ready now. His voice snapped me out of my daze. I hurried to wash up, then headed out to breakfast with him. The whole incident already forgotten. For the rest of the month, Xavier hardly came home. I had so much free time that Morgan and I went out on all kinds of excursions. Every day. We shopped, watched movies and went on food trips. There was never a dull day. One evening, as Morgan walked me home, he suddenly said hesitantly, I'm sorry, Maddie. I lied about something. I blinked in surprise. What? Remember the first morning we had breakfast together? I'd actually been ready for a while. I just didn't want to come downstairs. Because I saw you talking to a man. Is he your husband? I nodded. Pity and sadness filled Morgan's eyes. He treats you poorly. Even I know you don't like strawberry-flavored things. But he bought you a strawberry cake. And that other girl with him was obviously into him. Yet he didn't even try to distance himself from her. His voice grew quicker and started to tremble. I don't think he loves you. I stood there in stunned silence for a long moment. He doesn't love me. He had been one of the students my parents sponsored. The first time I met him, he was wearing a crisp white collared shirt. His shoulders squared and his back perfectly straight. It was love at first sight. I pursued him. After countless advances, he finally agreed to date me. Before long, we got married. All these years, I had never once asked whether he truly loved me. He had never told me on his own either. The question lingered in my mind as I opened the door. To my surprise, Xavier, who hadn't come home in a month, was sitting on the couch with a stormy expression. He glared at me and asked, who was that? My husband's voice, usually laced with a cool, clinical detachment, was jagged. 0. He sat in the center of our plush gray sofa, his posture rigid, a glass of scotch sweating on the side table beside him. Who was that? He repeated, his eyes locking onto mine as I closed the front door behind me. I didn't flinch. A month ago, a look like that would have had my heart hammering against my ribs, desperate to explain, to apologize, to soothe whatever irritation had ruffled his feathers. Tonight, I felt remarkably light. The cool night air still clung to my skin, and the taste of the artisanal gelato Morgan had bought me was still sweet on my tongue. A friend, I replied easily, kicking off my heels and placing them neatly in the closet. His name is Morgan. Xavier let out a short, humorless laugh. He stood up, running a hand through his hair, a habit he had when a lecture wasn't going his way. A friend? Maddie, I saw him drop you off. He was looking at you like He trailed off, his jaw tightening. And you let him walk you right to the porch. What is this? Some cheap, transparent attempt to make me jealous because I had to work late? You didn't just work late, Xavier, I said, my voice steady as I walked past him toward the kitchen to pour myself a glass of water. You haven't been home in a month. I was at the lab. The funding cycle is closing, and Reina's data was a disaster. I had to rebuild the entire modeling framework from scratch. He followed me, his shadow stretching long and imposing across the hardwood floor. I am working to secure our future. And what are you doing? Parading some college boy around our neighborhood? I turned to face him, leaning against the kitchen counter. I took a slow sip of water. You're the one who told me to explore myself, Xavier. You said open relationships are popular, that I should stop clinging to you. I took your advice. I'm exploring. Xavier stared at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and sheer disbelief. For years, I had been the constant in his life, the quiet, accommodating wife who stayed in the background, who tolerated his long hours, his coldness, and his growing attachment to his young research assistant. He had assumed that my life revolved so entirely around him that I would never actually take his words seriously. His advice had been a shield, a clever way to silence my complaints about Reina without having to feel guilty. He hadn't expected me to actually open the door he had unlocked. This is ridiculous, Xavier muttered, stepping closer, trying to reclaim his usual commanding presence. Maddie, look at yourself. You're a grown woman, a married woman. You're playing house with some broke student just to spite me. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? What if my colleagues see you? Then they see me, I said, setting my glass down. Just like your student saw me get thrown out of your office while you comforted Reina. I think we're even on the embarrassment front. That was a professional crisis, he snapped. And this is my personal exploration, I replied, matching his tone with a calm that clearly infuriated him. I'm going to bed, Xavier. I'm tired. Maddie. I didn't stay to listen. I walked up the stairs, leaving him alone in the dark kitchen. For the first time in our 3 years of marriage, I didn't lie awake, wondering if he was angry with me. I slept soundly, lulled by the quiet realization that my world didn't begin and end with Xavier Bates. The next afternoon, while Xavier was back at the university, I made a decision. Morgan's lease on his cramped, shared apartment was ending, and his landlord was raising the rent to an exorbitant amount. He had mentioned it casually over coffee, his brow furrowing as he calculated how many extra shifts he would need to pull at the bar just to afford a tiny basement room. Why don't you move in here? I had suggested. Morgan had nearly choked on his pastry. Maddie, no. I couldn't. That's your husband's house. I can't just move in. Xavier is rarely here, I told him, and it was the absolute truth. And when he stays in his study or stares at his laptop. We have 3 spare bedrooms. You can have the master guest suite on the 2nd floor. It has its own bathroom, plenty of desk space for your graduate studies, and you won't have to work 20 hours a week just to pay rent. You can focus on your thesis. He had looked at me with those wide, earnest eyes, searching my face for any sign of a joke. When he realized I was serious, a slow, radiant smile spread across his face. Are you sure, Maddie? I don't want to cause trouble for you. You aren't causing trouble, I said softly, reaching across the table to touch his hand. You're keeping me company. By the end of the week, Morgan had moved his few belongings into our house. His entire life fit into 3 cardboard boxes and a duffel bag. It was a stark contrast to Xavier, who collected expensive, leather-bound books he never read, and designer watches he rarely wore just to project an image of success. Having Morgan in the house changed the entire atmosphere. The quiet, suffocating silence of the villa was replaced by the warm hum of life. In the mornings, I would wake up to the smell of freshly brewed coffee and the sound of Morgan humming in the kitchen. He made breakfast every single day, perfectly poached eggs, light as air pancakes, or fresh fruit platters arranged with meticulous care. One evening, I found him sitting on the sofa in the living room, wearing the gray silk pajamas I had bought in Paris. They fit his lean, athletic frame perfectly, far better than they ever would have fit Xavier. Do you like them? I asked, leaning against the doorframe. Morgan looked up from his textbook, a faint blush creeping up his neck. They're incredibly soft, Maddie. I've never worn anything this nice in my life. I feel like royalty. They were meant to be worn, I said, walking over and sitting beside him. They've spent 2 years sitting in the back of a closet because someone else thought they were a waste of money. Then whoever that was is a fool, Morgan said softly, his gaze dropping to my lips before lifting to meet my eyes. There was a quiet intensity in his look that made my breath hitch. He didn't rush me. He never rushed me. He simply reached out and gently tucked a stray lock of hair behind my ear. Thank you, Maddie, for everything. To celebrate his first full week staying with me, I opened a bottle of Chateau Margaux from Xavier's private wine cellar. It was a vintage Xavier had bought to celebrate his promotion to full professor, but he had never opened it, claiming we needed a truly prestigious occasion to justify it. To me, sitting on the rug with Morgan, eating homemade pasta, and laughing until our sides ached was the most prestigious occasion I could think of. This is amazing, Morgan said, swirling the dark red liquid in his glass. I'm probably ruining the tasting notes by pairing it with garlic bread, but I don't care. Garlic bread makes everything better, I laughed, taking a sip. The wine was rich and complex, but the company was what made it truly intoxicating. As we talked, the conversation turned to his studies. Morgan was in his first year of postgrad, pursuing a degree in applied statistics and data modeling. He was incredibly brilliant, but he was struggling to find a clean, comprehensive dataset to use for his master's thesis. My advisor keeps rejecting my proposals, Morgan sighed, running a hand through his hair. He says the public databases I'm using are too messy and don't have enough variables to support a complex predictive model. If I don't find a high-quality dataset soon, I'm going to fall behind on my graduation timeline. An idea sparked in my mind. What kind of data do you need? I asked. Environmental modeling, demographic trends, or long-term behavioral metrics. He said. Anything that has been meticulously compiled over a period of at least 3 to 5 years. Wait here, I said. I stood up and walked down the hall to Xavier's home study. The room was dark, smelling faintly of old paper and Xavier's expensive cologne. He kept his filing cabinets unlocked because, as he had told me on multiple occasions, it's not like you'd understand any of my research anyway, Maddie. You just get a headache trying to read the titles. I opened the bottom drawer of his desk. There, neatly organized in manila folders, were the raw, printed datasets from his major 5-year study on urban environmental shifts, the very research that had put him on the academic map and earned him his tenure. Beside them lay several USB drives containing the complete digital spreadsheets, including the raw, unedited figures his research assistants had compiled. I took one of the backup USB drives and a thick binder of the raw data sheets. I walked back to the living room and slid them across the table to Morgan. Will this help? Morgan picked up the binder, his eyes scanning the cover page. His jaw dropped. Maddie, this is Dr. Bates's primary research data. The long-term urban ecology study. This is gold standard data. It's incredibly rare to get access to raw, unaggregated sheets like this. He leaves them lying around, I said carelessly. He has dozens of backups. Use it to write your thesis, Morgan. He'll never even notice. Morgan looked at the drive, then at me. Are you sure? If he finds out. He won't, I said, leaning closer to him. And even if he does, he's the one who wanted me to be open. Let's consider this an open sharing of academic resources. Morgan let out a soft laugh, his eyes shining with admiration. Maddie, you have no idea how much this helps me. You're literally saving my academic career. He reached out, wrapping his hand around mine. The warmth of his palm sent a pleasant shiver down my spine. For the first time in a very long time, I felt valued. I wasn't just a housewife waiting in a quiet villa for a husband who preferred the company of a clumsy assistant. I was someone who held power. Someone who could change the trajectory of another person's life. A week later, Xavier came home. He didn't call beforehand. He simply unlocked the front door at 3 in the afternoon, looking exhausted and disheveled. He threw his briefcase onto the entryway table and took a deep breath, expecting the usual quiet, empty house. Instead, he was greeted by the rich, savory aroma of roasting garlic and rosemary. He walked into the kitchen and froze. Morgan was standing at the stove, wearing Xavier's favorite gray silk pajamas, casually flipping a pan of sautéed vegetables. I was sitting on the kitchen island, a glass of the Chateau Margaux in my hand, laughing at something Morgan had just said. Xavier's face turned an ash gray, then flushed a deep, violent red. What the hell is going on here? Xavier roared, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. Morgan startled, nearly dropping the pan. He looked at Xavier, then at me, instinctively taking a half-step in front of me as if to shield me. Xavier, I said, setting my wine glass down with a soft click. You're home. Early. Who is this? And why is he wearing my pajamas? Drinking my wine? Xavier's finger trembled as he pointed at the open bottle of Chateau Margaux on the counter. Do you have any idea how much that bottle costs? It was for a special occasion. We are having a special occasion, I said smoothly, stepping down from the island. Morgan passed his thesis proposal review today. We're celebrating. In my house? In my clothes? Xavier's voice cracked with rage. He took a step toward Morgan, his fists clenched. Get out. Get out of my house right now. Before I call the police. He lives here, Xavier, I said, my voice ice cold. Xavier stopped dead in his tracks. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. What did you say? He lives here, I repeated. He moves into the master guest suite. I let him stay. I let him wear the pajamas you called a waste of money. I let him drink the wine you kept locked away for some imaginary future success. He actually appreciates them. He appreciates me. Are you insane? Xavier shouted, his eyes wide with a frantic, desperate anger. You brought a stray college boy into our marriage? Maddie, this has gone too far. I told you to explore yourself, not turn our home into a halfway house for broke students. You wanted an open relationship, Xavier, I reminded him, my voice dangerously calm. You wanted the freedom to rush off to Reina in the middle of the night. To spend our money on her dresses, to buy her breakfast while I sat at home alone. Did you think the rules only applied to you? Reina is my student. She is my assistant. It is a professional relationship. Then why did you buy her a $300 designer dress, Xavier? I asked, raising an eyebrow. I saw the receipt. I also saw her Instagram post. Do you think I'm blind? Or did you just assume I was too stupid to connect the dots? Xavier opened his mouth to argue, but the words caught in his throat. He looked at Morgan, who stood quiet but resolute, then back at me. The realization that he had completely lost control of the situation, and of me, seemed to hit him like a physical blow. This is my house, Xavier whispered, his voice shaking. I pay the mortgage. My parents bought this villa as a wedding gift, Xavier, I reminded him gently. The deed is in my name. If anyone is leaving, it's not Morgan. Xavier flinched as if he had been slapped. The villa, his comfortable lifestyle. The very ground he stood on, it had all been provided by my family's wealth. He had spent years pretending he was the master of the house, looking down on me to soothe his own deep-seated insecurity about coming from nothing. But now, the harsh reality of his position was laid bare. He looked at me, a desperate, wild look in his eyes. Then, without another word, he grabbed his briefcase, turned on his heel, and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him so hard the glass panes rattled. The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't suffocating. It was liberating. Morgan stepped closer to me, his hand gently finding mine. Are you okay, Maddie? I've never been better, I said, and for the first time in years, I meant it. Over the next 2 months, the dynamic of our lives shifted entirely. Xavier stopped coming home altogether, choosing to stay in a small studio apartment near the campus. He only communicated through tense, curt text messages, mostly demanding his personal books or files. I ignored most of them, letting Morgan handle the packing of Xavier's non-essential belongings and leaving them on the porch for Xavier to pick up while we were out. Meanwhile, Morgan's thesis was progressing at an unbelievable pace. He spent hours in the guest suite, surrounded by printed spreadsheets and complex statistical graphs. Every evening, he would come down to dinner, his eyes bright with excitement, and explain his findings to me. He didn't talk down to me. Instead, he took the time to explain the mathematical concepts in simple terms, laughing with delight when I quickly grasped the logic behind his models. You're incredibly smart, Maddie, he said one night as we washed the dishes together. Honestly, your analytical intuition is sharper than half the graduate students in my department. You just never had anyone encourage you to use it. Xavier always told me I was too emotional to think logically, I murmured, staring at the soapy water. Xavier is a fool who wanted to keep you small so he could feel big, Morgan said firmly. He dried his hands, turned to me, and took both of my hands in his. You are brilliant, Maddie. Don't ever let anyone make you feel otherwise. A few days later, Morgan came down the stairs, his laptop in hand, a look of profound confusion and worry on his face. Maddie, we have a problem, he said, his voice hushed. What is it? Did your advisor reject the proposal again? No, Morgan said, sitting beside me on the sofa and opening a massive spreadsheet. It's Dr. Bates's data. The raw urban ecology dataset you gave me. What about it? I've been running the regression analyses and checking the standard deviations. To build my predictive model, Morgan explained, pointing to a series of highlighted cells on his screen. But the math doesn't work. The raw data sheets, compiled by his assistant, Raina, are filled with impossible anomalies. Temperature readings that fluctuate by 30 degrees in a single hour. Demographic counts that double and then halve within a week. It's not just bad. Data entry. Maddie, it's fabricated. I stared at the screen, my heart skipping a beat. Fabricated? As in, made up? Yes, Morgan said, his expression grim. It looks like Raina was supposed to conduct field surveys over a 2-year period, but she didn't do them. Instead, she just plugged in random numbers that fit the hypothesis Dr. Bates wanted to prove. And because Dr. Bates was so blinded by, well, whatever his relationship with her was, he didn't verify the raw data. He just took her aggregated summaries, wrote his major paper, and published it. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. Xavier built his entire academic reputation on that paper. It's the reason he got tenure. It's the reason he received a $500,000 research grant from the state. If anyone runs a rigorous replication study using his raw data, they'll realize the math is impossible, Morgan said. The paper will be retracted, and his career will be over. Maddie, this is academic fraud. I sat in silence, the weight of his words sinking in. For years, Xavier had treated me like I was a burden, a dim-witted nuisance who couldn't possibly understand the high-minded intellectual world he inhabited. He had praised Raina, defended her incompetence, and abandoned me on my birthday to tend to her emergencies. And all the while, the golden girl he had protected was a fraud, and he was the arrogant fool who had signed his name to her lies. What are you going to do with your thesis, Morgan? I asked quietly. Morgan looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of concern and loyalty. I can't use this data, Maddie. If I use fabricated data in my thesis, my degree will be revoked, and my academic future will be ruined. I have to report the anomalies to my department head. But, if I do that, it will trigger an official investigation into Dr. Bates. He's your husband. I don't want to destroy your life. I looked at Morgan, this sweet, brilliant young man who had treated me with nothing but respect, who had actually seen me, appreciated me, and loved me in a way Xavier never had. My life with Xavier is already over, I said, a slow, cold smile spreading across my lips. He wanted me to explore myself, Morgan. And I've explored enough to know that I don't protect people who treat me like garbage. Submit your thesis proposal with the corrected, real-world data and report the anomalies. Let the chips fall where they may. Morgan's eyes widened, a spark of fierce admiration lighting up his gaze. Are you sure, Maddie? I've never been surer of anything in my life. The storm broke on our 3rd wedding anniversary. It was also my 100th day with Morgan. To celebrate, Morgan had planned a beautiful, quiet evening. He had spent the entire afternoon preparing a spectacular 5-course meal, and we had bought tickets to an outdoor classical concert in the park, something I had wanted to do for years, but Xavier had always dismissed as bourgeois and boring. Just as I was heading upstairs to change into my dress, my phone rang. It was Xavier. Maddie, he said, his voice tight, strained, and oddly desperate. Are you at home? I am, I said coolly. But I'm about to head out. Don't go, he pleaded. It was the first time I had ever heard him plead. Maddie, please. It's our 3rd anniversary. I booked a table at Le Petit Chateau's. The place you wanted to go last year. I've been waiting here for 30 minutes. Please, Maddie. Just come dinner with me. We need to talk. I looked at my watch. It was 7:30 p.m. I'm busy, Xavier, I said. Busy? With what? His voice flared with sudden, ugly jealousy. With that boy? Maddie, today is our wedding anniversary. You're my wife. You can't stand me up for some charity case. I can, and I am, I said, my voice deadpan. I'm celebrating my 100th day with Morgan. Enjoy your dinner, Xavier. I hung up before he could respond. An hour later, Morgan and I were sitting on a picnic blanket in the park, the swell of a live orchestra filling the warm evening air. He had packed a thermos of chilled white wine and a box of delicate lemon tarts, my absolute favorite dessert. Happy 100 days, Maddie, Morgan whispered, leaning in to kiss my cheek. His lips were warm, and his hand rested gently on my waist. Happy 100 days, I smiled, leaning my head against his shoulder. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel the crushing weight of loneliness on my wedding anniversary. I felt cherished. We returned to the villa late, laughing and holding hands as we walked up the driveway. As soon as I unlocked the front door and stepped into the entryway, the smile died on my face. Xavier was standing in the dark hallway. His coat was half unbuttoned, his tie askew. His eyes were bloodshot, his face pale and haggard. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days, a stark contrast to the proud, untouchable professor he usually pretended to be. "Morgan," I said quietly, not taking my eyes off my husband. "Can you give us a moment?" Morgan looked at Xavier, his posture immediately tensing, but he nodded. "I'll be upstairs if you need me, Maddie." He walked past Xavier, his shoulder brushing against him. Xavier didn't even look at him, his wild, bloodshot eyes were locked entirely on me. Once Morgan was upstairs, Xavier took a step toward me. "Maddie," he breathed, his voice cracking. He reached out, his hands trembling. As he grabbed my shoulders and pushed me back against the wall, his grip desperate, almost frantic. He didn't hurt me, but the sheer force of his emotion was overwhelming. "Maddie, why? Why do you only seem interested in spending time with him instead of me?" I stared at him in utter confusion. The arrogance, the cold superiority, it was all gone, replaced by a pathetic, clawing desperation. "What?" I asked, my voice flat. "You're the one who said we had an open relationship, Xavier. You're the one who told me to take another lover, to explore myself." I shot back, "I'm just doing exactly what you told me to. I didn't mean like this." Xavier shouted, tears finally spilling over his bloodshot eyes. I thought you would go out, realize how difficult the world is, and come running back to me. I thought you'd see how much you needed me. But you brought him here. You gave him my life. He's wearing my clothes, drinking my wine, living in my house. It's my house, Xavier, I reminded him coldly. And he actually appreciates what's in it, including me. "I love you, Maddie," he cried out, the words sounding hollow and jagged in the quiet house. "I've always loved you. I was stressed, and Raina was always there, praising me, making me feel like a god. But she's nothing compared to you. I made a mistake. I'll fire her. I'll never see her again. Just tell him to leave. Please, Maddie. Let's go back to how things were." I looked at him, this man I had adored for years, this man whose approval I had begged for, whose scraps of affection I had gratefully gathered like a starving dog. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, not even pity. Just a profound, liberating emptiness. "How things were?" I asked softly. "You mean the version of our marriage where I cry myself to sleep on my birthday while you're with another woman? The version where you tell me I'm stupid and useless?" "No thank you, Xavier. I prefer how things are now." Before he could answer, the front door bell rang. It was late, nearly midnight. Xavier frowned, wiping his eyes hastily as I walked past him to open the door. Two men in dark suits were standing on the porch, alongside a security guard from the university. One of them held an official-looking document. "Dr. Xavier Bates," the man in the front asked, his voice crisp and professional. Xavier stepped forward, his academic persona instinctively trying to reassert itself. "Yes? I am Dr. Bates. What is this about?" "I am Dr. Vance from the University Academic Integrity Board," the man said, handing Xavier the document. "We have received a formal allegation of academic fraud regarding your published research on urban environmental shifts. A preliminary audit of your raw data sheets has revealed significant, systemic fabrication of data. Effective immediately, your tenure is suspended, your access to university facilities is revoked, and all state-funded grant accounts under your name have been frozen pending a full investigation." Xavier's face went entirely white. He looked at the document, his hands shaking so violently the paper rattled. This is a mistake," Xavier stammered, his voice shrinking to a terrified whisper. "My research assistant, Raina, she compiled the raw data. I simply analyzed it. If there are errors, they are her doing. The paper was published under your name as the primary investigator, Dr. Bates," Dr. Vance said coldly. "The responsibility lies with you. Furthermore, Miss Raina Vance was interviewed by our committee 2 hours ago. She has signed a statement claiming that she was pressured by you to deliver specific results, and that she fabricated the data under your direct instructions to secure your funding." Xavier gasped, taking a step back. She said what? That's a lie. She's the one who couldn't read the data. I protected her. I bought her dresses. Your personal relationship with your assistant is of no interest to the board. Dr. Vance interrupted. However, the evidence of fraud is overwhelming. Good evening, Dr. Bates. The men turned and walked down the steps, leaving Xavier standing in the open doorway, utterly destroyed. Raina had thrown him under the bus without a single second thought. The girl he had ruined his marriage for, the girl he had treated like a fragile flower, had sacrificed him to save her own skin the moment the wind turned. Xavier turned to me, his eyes wide with a horrific, sickening realization. You, he whispered, pointing a trembling finger at me. You did this. You gave him my data. That boy, he reported me. No, Xavier, I said, my voice quiet but filled with an undeniable power. Your own arrogance did this. You assumed I was too stupid to understand your work, so you left your fraud lying around in plain sight. You assumed Raina was loyal to you, when she was only loyal to your status. And you assumed I would always be there, waiting for you, no matter how much you humiliated me. I walked over to the entryway table, picked up his briefcase, and handed it to him. You wanted me to explore the world, Xavier, I said, opening the front door wide. I've explored it. And I've decided there's no room in my world for you. Get out. Xavier looked at me, realizing with absolute certainty that there was no begging, no crying, and no apology that would ever make me look at him with love again. His career was over, his reputation was ruined, and the wealthy, comfortable life he had built on my family's back was gone. He took his briefcase, his shoulders slumping, his head bowed, and walked out into the cold, dark night. I closed the door and locked it. As I turned around, Morgan was standing at the top of the stairs. He didn't say anything. He simply walked down, wrapped his arms around me, and held me close. In his arms, I didn't feel small, or stupid, or lonely. I felt entirely, beautifully free.